How does a healthy American student enter North Korea on a short tour, get sentenced to 15 years of hard labor, disappear from public view, and return home unable to explain what happened? That is the question at the center of Otto Warmbier's case. And nearly a decade later, the most disturbing part is not only that he died, it is that the public record still cannot answer the simplest question clearly. What happened to him inside North Korea? This is exactly the kind of case where emotion can easily outrun evidence. Korea Radar exists to slow that down. If you want North Korea, South Korea, and the Korean Peninsula explained with clearer context, not rumor or propaganda, subscribe to Korea Radar. This case is painful, but it also reveals how law, secrecy, diplomacy, and state power can collide inside one of the world's most closed systems. Otto Warmbier was a University of Virginia student from Ohio. In late 2015, he traveled to North Korea with a tour company. It was supposed to be a short visit, a controlled tour, a strange but memorable trip into a country most Americans would never see. But North Korea was not an ordinary destination. The United States had already warned citizens against travel there. There was no U.S. embassy in Pyongyang. There was no normal consular safety net. And once a foreigner entered North Korea's legal system, the rules could change very quickly. That is the open question of this video. Was Otto Warmbier's case only about one alleged act inside a hotel? Or did it expose something much larger about North Korea's legal opacity, detainee diplomacy, and the danger of entering a system where the state controls the evidence, the narrative, and the access to truth? North Korea accused Otto of trying to remove a propaganda item from the Yanggakdo International Hotel in Pyongyang. That accusation mattered because in North Korea, political symbols are not treated like ordinary decorations. Images, slogans, and references tied to the leadership can carry ideological and legal weight. What might look like vandalism or foolish behavior elsewhere can be framed as a hostile act in North Korea. That does not mean we should treat North Korea's accusation as proven fact. The public evidence has long been disputed. The confession appeared to many outside observers to be staged or coerced. The trial was short, the sentence was severe, and the gap between the alleged act and the punishment was shocking. 15 years of hard labor. That number still lands hard, because even if someone accepts North Korea's accusation, the punishment reveals the deeper problem. This was not a legal environment most outside viewers would recognize as transparent, balanced, or predictable. And when a legal system is closed, the first thing that disappears is trust. You may be thinking, if there was a confession, why is there still uncertainty? That question is fair, but in authoritarian legal systems, a confession does not always end the debate. It can become part of the performance. North Korea has used public confessions before. They can serve legal purposes, propaganda purposes, and diplomatic purposes at the same time. In Otto's case, the confession did more than describe an alleged act. It linked his behavior to hostile forces, American institutions, and political motives. That turned a student's alleged hotel incident into a state security case. And once a case becomes political in North Korea, the person at the center is no longer just a defendant. He becomes a message to foreigners, a message to North Koreans, a message to Washington, and possibly a bargaining chip. That is where this case becomes bigger than one courtroom. North Korea and the United States had no normal diplomatic relationship. When Americans were detained, the United States had to rely on protecting power arrangements and back-channel communication. That means access could be delayed, information could be limited, families could be left waiting, officials could be forced to work through indirect routes. This matters because silence is not neutral. When a person is held in a closed system, every missing update creates another layer of fear. Where is he? Who has seen him? What condition is he in? Is he being questioned? Is he receiving medical care? Is he being used in negotiations? These are not small questions. They are the questions that define detainee diplomacy. And Otto Warmbier's case shows how frightening those questions become when almost all reliable information passes through the same state that is holding the person. If you are still watching, you already see why this is not just a tragic biography. It is a window into North Korea's legal system, U.S. North Korea diplomacy, and the risks foreign visitors face when normal protections disappear. Subscribe to Korea Radar because we separate confirmed facts from claims that still need caution. Then came the medical mystery. North Korea said Otto's condition involved botulism and a sleeping pill. U.S. doctors reported that they found no evidence supporting active botulism. They identified severe brain injury connected to lack of oxygen, but the exact event that caused it was not clearly established in the public record. That distinction matters. It is tempting to fill the silence with certainty. Many people did. Some said one explanation must be true, others said another explanation must be true. But a serious analysis has to stay with what can be supported. North Korea's explanation was challenged by U.S. medical findings. The family and some officials made strong accusations against North Korea. A U.S. federal court later ordered North Korea to pay damages in the case. But the public medical record still leaves the exact cause and circumstances unresolved. That is not weakness. That is accuracy. And accuracy matters here because the unanswered questions are the point. The issue is not only what happened medically. The issue is why the outside world could not get a clear, timely, independently verified answer. That is what makes this case so significant. When law is closed, evidence becomes uncertain. When medical access is controlled, timelines become fragile. When diplomacy is indirect, families wait in darkness. And when the state controls the story, even death does not guarantee answers. Otto was released in June 2017. He returned to the United States in a condition that shocked his family and the public. 6 days later, he died. The timeline was devastating. But the political timing also mattered. This happened during one of the most tense periods in recent U.S. North Korea relations. North Korea had been accelerating its nuclear and missile programs. The United States was increasing pressure. Public language between Washington and Pyongyang was becoming sharper. The risk of miscalculation felt real. In that environment, Otto Warmbier's case became more than a human rights case. It became a symbol. For Americans, it represented the danger of North Korean detention. For U.S. officials, it became part of the argument for tougher pressure. For North Korea, the case had already been used to project state authority and anti-American messaging. This is the uncomfortable truth. Otto was a person first, a son, a student, a young man whose life was cut short. But in international politics, people can become symbols very quickly. That should make us careful, not less emotional, more careful. Because when a real person becomes a symbol, different governments and commentators may try to use the story for their own purpose. Some may use it to demand pressure. Some may use it to defend diplomacy. Some may use it to prove that North Korea cannot be trusted. Some may use it to argue that Americans should never travel there. But Korea Radar has to ask a deeper question. What does this case show about systems? It shows that North Korea's legal system can treat political symbolism as a matter of state security. It shows that foreign detainees can become part of diplomacy. It shows that the absence of normal diplomatic relations can make a crisis harder to manage. It shows that medical truth becomes harder to establish when the state controls access and timing. It shows that unanswered questions can survive long after the headlines fade. That is why Otto Warmbier's case still matters. Not because we should replay his suffering, not because we should turn his story into entertainment, but because it reveals a structural danger. In an open system, evidence can be challenged. Doctors can examine records, lawyers can test claims, diplomats can visit citizens, journalists can ask questions, families can demand answers, courts can review procedures. The process is never perfect, but there are channels. In North Korea, those channels are limited or absent. That is the gap that swallowed this case, the gap between accusation and proof, between confession and coercion concerns, between medical claim and medical evidence, between detention and access, between state narrative and independent truth. And in that gap, the central question remains: why did Otto Warmbier not survive North Korea? We can answer part of it. He was detained. He was sentenced harshly. He was held in a closed system. He returned with severe brain injury. He died shortly after coming home. North Korea's official explanation was challenged. The exact public medical timeline still leaves unanswered questions, but the full answer remains beyond reach. That is the tragedy. Not only that Otto died, but that the system around him made truth difficult to recover. For South Korea and the wider Korean Peninsula, this case also carries a strategic warning. North Korea is not only a military issue, it is not only about missiles, nuclear tests, sanctions, or summits. It is also a legal and human rights issue. How a state treats one detainee tells us something about how it understands law, power, and accountability. And when that same state is also a nuclear-armed actor facing sanctions and diplomatic isolation, individual cases can become international flashpoints. That is why this story belongs on Korea radar. It connects human life to state power. It connects legal opacity to diplomacy. It connects North Korea's internal system to the risks faced by outsiders. And it reminds us that the Korean Peninsula is not only shaped by armies and leaders. It is also shaped by the people caught between systems. So what should viewers take away? First, Otto Warmbier's case should be discussed with care. Some facts are documented, but some of the most important questions remain unresolved in the public record. Second, the case exposes the danger of closed legal systems. When evidence, medical access, and diplomacy are controlled by the state, even basic answers can become hard to obtain. Third, the case still matters because it changed how many people view travel to North Korea, U.S. North Korea relations, and the human cost of political confrontation. Leave your view in the comments. Which unanswered part of Otto Warmbier's case matters most? The arrest, the confession, the medical timeline, or the diplomatic silence? And subscribe to Korea Radar if you want serious analysis of North Korea, South Korea, and the Korean Peninsula without propaganda, rumor, or cheap shock. Some stories end with answers. This one still ends with a question.